Hello and welcome to my first in a sequence of tutorials on installing a development server. Now obviously the first question that a lot of people have is, what is a development server and why do I need one? Well, that can be a fairly complicated thing to answer, so let me just show you a quick example. On the screen right now we have the PHP info page. Now imagine the people at PHP said, could you please redesign this? You know, it hasn't changed in a while and we would want it to look different. As a designer, you take a look at that, you say, sure, I can do that. You take a look, let's say, underneath the hood, you take a look at the source code of that web page and you see a lot of information. So it's an XHTML1 transitional page, there's a little bit of CSS up at the top, and quite a bit of table code. So, as a designer, you tell yourself, well, there's got to be some way that I can change this. You tell them, okay, please just give me the original file, and I see what I can do. They send you that original file, you download it, you put it inside Dreamweaver, and you open it up, and there you go, you've got one line of code. PHP, PHP info, that's it. And you're going, where's the HTML, where's the cascading style sheets, where's the web code that I know? And that is why we need a development server. Compared to the early days of the web when everything was basic HTML written by hand, uploaded onto a web server, over the last, 10, 15 years, the web has gotten huge. It's gotten so big, in fact, that a lot of big websites, think Facebook, think Google, think Twitter, really big sites have to rely on the machines doing work because there's just too much work for human beings to be able to do it all. Think of Facebook. There's no way you could get an army of web designers, updating statuses and FTPing files back onto the server. It's just impossible to do. So in the modern web, we use languages like PHP, for example, that live on the server. They are server-side code, and they let the server do certain things. So, for example, here I've got my one line of PHP info code in my document, and if I hit the live button in Dreamweaver CS6, that's supposed to transmit that information to a testing server, and the testing server will read the PHP, do whatever the PHP instructions tell it to do, and send you back HTML. So in Dreamweaver, I simply click the live button, and when I click it, nothing happens. I've got absolutely no HTML, I've got no processing of the PHP instructions, I wind up with a blank page. So that is exactly why we need a development server, is you need the server software to process the instructions and give you something that you can actually do web design with. So that is what we want. Now, I have actually installed one thing called Bitnami. And Bitnami is one of several software options. I'm going to show you what those options are in a minute. But on the computer where I do my web development, I have the Apache web server and the MySQL database server installed. So if I start Apache and I go back to Dreamweaver, when I hit the live button, I actually see the PHP info instructions have actually been converted to table code HTML CSS. And I can even go into live code view in Dreamweaver, and I will actually see all the code that the PHP info instruction is generating. Okay, so now that I actually see this, I can start doing design. I can change colors, I can change widths and heights and, fonts and things like that. But if it wasn't for the presence of the actual development server, I'd have one line of PHP. How can you design anything with that? So that's why we need it. So let's go take a look at our software options. Now, I said that I was going to use Bitnami. Bitnami is something that I started using rather recently, but pretty much every software option I'm going to show you today offers you the same thing. It offers you Apache, which is the world's most popular web server software. Very famous for being very good, very reliable, and free. The MySQL database, which is the most popular web backend database. The PHP language, and some other different things. Some will include Perl, for example. You'll get phpMyAdmin. There's different things. So bitnami.org is one option. If you have a Macintosh, you can actually use MAMP. So the M in MAMP is Macintosh, Apache, MySQL, PHP. The difference between MAMP and MAMP Pro is MAMP will basically host one site on your machine, whereas MAMP Pro can let you configure different sites so that you don't have to move files around. If you have several clients, for example, you can go to one site or the other without stopping and starting and changing files around, and it's kind of messy. Otherwise, it's exactly the same thing, and personally, I've been using MAMP for quite a few years now. If you have Windows, there's basically the same thing, but called WAMP, or WAMP server, so Apache MySQL PHP on Windows. And there is something called XAMPP, XAMPP, so cross-platform, that's what the X is for, Apache MySQL PHP and Perl. They all basically do the same thing. They are all free except for MAMP Pro. The free version of the simple version of MAMP is free, and it's really a question of preference. Do you like one more than the other? For design students, it often boils down to which one is the easiest to install and get up and running. Now, all these projects have come about because going to the Apache site, downloading Apache, going to MySQL, downloading that, going to PHP, downloading that, and then setting them all up to work together is not exactly trivial. If you've got a background in computer science, it's not so bad, but for someone who's had classes in Photoshop and color theory, trying to set up, 3 different servers and languages and things, it's a bit hairy. So these software packages have been invented simply to make people's lives easier, because you download once, click twice, it installs, it's up and running. Now, I'm going to explain how to do this using Bitnami for the very simple reason that this is what I'm using in class, and it doesn't require admin rights to actually install it. So this is why all of a sudden, I've switched from using MAMP to Bitnami. It actually works well in the classroom. Like I said before, I've been using MAMP Pro for the last couple of years at home. So on the bitnami.org site, you simply go to Downloads. And on the page that opens, which is bitnami.org/stacks, you have the different choices of infrastructure here on the side. So you have the MAMP stack, so Macintosh, Apache, MySQL, PHP. You have the same thing for Linux, the same thing for Windows, and there's a bunch of other things here. Depending on specifically what kind of application you want to code, the options are there. So we're going to download the MAMP stack, which is just the rough or the essential server software. It's not like it has, for example, WordPress pre-installed or something else. It is just the back end so that we can install the things that we want later. So back to the Bitnami page, what we want to do here is we want to download the MAMP stack. So because it's Macintosh, it's MAMP, not L for Linux or W for Windows. If you've got those platforms, you know what to do. So we click this button here, and we wind up on the actual MAMP stack page, and there is the actual free download installer here, or you can actually go get it through the Mac App Store, which is also free download. The beauty of the App Store is that when there's updates, you will get notified through Mac OS X. But either or, basically the same thing. You click on this link and you download the file. Now, I've already downloaded that, and as you can see here, we get a DMG file. For those of you who don't know, the .dmg extension stands for disk image. In other words, when you double-click a DMG, the file opens, and to the Macintosh, your file that you just opened is actually a virtual CD-ROM. It's a volume or a device that is attached to the computer. So we can see that it's down here. I've got my my MacBook Pro icon, I've got 3 external USB drives, and I've got the MAMP icon that just showed up as if it was a DVD drive. So there's no instructions, there's nothing special here, it's just there, double click and go. So it tells you to open it. That security warning is part of Mac OS X. And it takes a few seconds for it to load. There we go. We get to see it. And there we go. Now, the setup is actually very straightforward. Usually the only thing you have to do is click Next. And the first part of the setup is to select the components. Now, if you are a programmer, you know very well which components you may want to work with. You might work with Zend, you might work with Symfony or Cake. It all depends on what you're going to do. As a web developer in the, let's say, the graphic user interface sense, so a web designer, there's no need to start picking through the components, just install them all. And, you know, for example, if you're going to be installing WordPress or Joomla or something, they may have certain dependencies on the frameworks that are here. So we just click Next. Now, for those of you who are my students at John Abbott College, this is the one thing that you really need to change. If you install Bitnami into the Applications folder, the Applications folder itself is a reserved part of the Mac OS X system, so you're going to need an admin password. But if you click on the folder icon here and you go install it somewhere else, for example on the desktop, on the work drive, something like that, it's not going to prompt you for admin privileges, and you can just use it as a regular user. So for example, I'm just going to click this over here and go put it on my desktop or something, and then that's going to be fine. So here I am, I've got my my preferred installation folder defined. It says select a folder, desktop Bitnami. I hit next. And over here, it is going to ask you for a MySQL root account password. You always want to have secure passwords when you are installing server software. The one difference when you're installing a development software is that this is only going to live on your machine while you are building the website. And after that, you might, completely change it, set up, for a different client and, work intensely on another project, but it's not like the server is going to be up 24/7, 365 like a real web server is. So while it's important that you put a secure password here, we don't have the same sort of security preoccupations that real servers do have. That being said, Bitnami or MAMP or WAMP or any of them are true 100% industrial strength server software. It's just installed on your machine in such a way that makes it easy for you to do web design. And you could literally host, websites off your laptop, for example. The reason we don't do that is simply because of the danger of hacking. If you're a designer, you are great at, making web pages look good. You may not be the type of person ready to, keep hackers out of your machine. So in general, development servers are restricted to the local network or your own machine. They're not open to the internet. So the password here, important. Write it down, don't forget it, but it's not the same sort of critical information as if this was going to be a live MySQL. So I'm going to type in my password here. And hit next. Now, learn more about Bitnami cloud hosting is basically if you want to actually have, the Bitnami cloud services, which is an extended range of services that could be really, really interesting. For people that are simply developing at home, taking classes, it isn't really necessary. So you can uncheck that. So I'm actually not going to hit the next button again. I've already got Bitnami installed on my computer. So I will simply go back and use that. Now, before I quit this dialog box, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to install. And once it does, it actually opens up a browser window and shows you the home page of your Bitnami installation. So bear with me, I'm just going to cancel, get out of here. Do I want to abort? Yes, I do. And I want to actually go back to my desktop and show you what you get. So I'm just going to close the installer window here, unmount the virtual CD. I can close this window here, and I've got Bitnami already installed. So Bitnami is a self-contained server setup. If you were going to, let's say, an internet company and take a look at the software that's installed on their machines, it would be very much the same thing. This installation is based on the premise that it looks like a Linux machine, which is the platform on which Apache and MySQL were originally developed for. Now, later on, they were ported to Macintosh and Windows, but this is pretty much Linux kind of software. So the type of folders that you're going to find resemble something that was installed on Linux or possibly Mac OS X, because Mac OS X is very similar. The important things are that we have the Apache 2 web server. So inside here is all the folders that are required to make Apache work. We've got different frameworks, so Cake, CodeIgniter, Symfony, Zend, which are very popular with PHP programmers. We have the actual control panel app, so to be able to start and stop Bitnami, that's what you use. There's very, very little configuration or anything to do here, just start and stop. Your database is MySQL, the PHP language is there, you've got the uninstaller, and you got something like Varnish, which is an accelerator. It makes your web applications run quite quickly. Now, in other words, all of this stuff is good for the, let's say, system administrator, network administrator, computer science people. This is the kind of stuff that they do. Web designers are much more preoccupied with the contents of the root folder. So htdocs inside Apache 2, that is where your all your HTML documents, your cascading style sheets, and everything else, that's where they go. So if I come over here and I start my Apache web server, and I want to take a look at the file called info. So this is my PHP info file from before. If I quick look at it, there you go, PHP info. That's the one line of code that I've got. One thing that you have to absolutely be sure to understand is that when you are developing web pages with a development server, you have to read the pages as given to you or served to you by the server, as opposed to reading them off the hard drive. So what you do not want to do is go open file. And then, for example, you can go in and find your Bitnami folder. Let me just go over here. I've got a shortcut to it. There's my Bitnami folder, and let's say I've got info.php. Now, when you try and open the file, as opposed to letting Apache serve it to you, it's going to do something like this. It's going to try and download it for you, ask you what application you want to use. It's not generating the code, so you actually have to cancel this. That's not the behavior that you want. And you want something that is served to you through the HTTP protocol. So we're speaking web here. And we want to go to the local machine, the local host. So 127.0.0.1, okay, and port 8080. Now, by default, Bitnami will install on port 8080. It's a simple number if you know that usually Apache is served on port 80. So to not complicate things, they don't mess with the regular ports for serving web services. This is development. It goes on port 8080. If you had any problems trying to install Bitnami, because maybe someone previously installed it on that machine, you could change the number. You could put it to 8081, you could put it to 8082, or pretty much almost any number as long as it's not used by something else. So when we hit that, we get to the Bitnami welcome screen. And I am right now in my root folder, so if I type in /info.php, I get the full web page that has been read by Apache. Apache has read the PHP instructions, has basically delivered all the HTML and CSS code that I need, and that is my final product. That's what I want to start working with. So that is why we need a back-end server setup. So Bitnami or MAMP or WAMP or LAMP, doesn't really matter. But without being able to see the result of the instructions, it's just really, really hard to design. So that's the end of the first tutorial. So you now know how to install the development server. Remember to always go to 127.0.0.1 port 8080. And then next step, we're going to take a look at how to actually start having fun with this and really start designing. So we're going to set up Dreamweaver to work with this.